You ever feel like you're in a room of people that are supposed to be your people, but they don't feel like your people? The tea that they're spilling isn't the tea that you relate to, or it makes you feel uncomfortable? That's loneliness.
Half of U.S. adults experience measurable loneliness, and it's greater among young adults.
The pandemic poured fuel on a fire that was already burning.
Dr. Vivek Murthy, the U.S. Surgeon General, says loneliness is an epidemic.
You struggle with loneliness when you're socially disconnected. It increases your risk of depression and anxiety and suicide, but it also increases your risk of physical illness as well.
When you look at some of the results that Cigna published, did anything surprise you?
As a mental health professional, no. Probably to the general public, yes.
You're talking about changing the social fabric. That's been decades in the making.
This documentary was made possible by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you, with major funding from the Seattle Rental Management and additional funding from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Healthy, thriving people build healthy, thriving economies. Thank you.
In the field of psychology, loneliness is defined as the pain resulting from one's inability to satisfy their social needs in quality and quantity. Since loneliness is dependent from person to person, loneliness and social isolation cannot be interchanged. Some people are happy living in solitude, needing little to no interactions, whereas for the rest of us, we need more interactions to feel okay.
In our hunter-gatherer era, people lived in groups of about 150 people, maintaining close contact with each other to survive predators and threats. Thus, relationships are primitive needs, not unlike water, food, and air. It is no surprise, then, that civilizations have long used exclusion from society as a form of punishment, like prison, or even worse, solitary confinement, the most extreme form of incarceration.
When our primitive needs aren't met, it can cause lasting mental and physical health impacts. One research study even suggests that chronic loneliness causes as much damage as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. When individuals lack the ability to call a friend, they often seek out destructive modes of escapism in response to their unmet needs, ranging from binge-watching TV to consuming substances, hurting themselves or others, and drowning their personal life in work.
A 2018 study, and many since then, have revealed that 1 in 4 Americans rarely or never feel as though anyone understands them, causing abject loneliness, a silent epidemic amplified by social media and our society's definition of success, aspects of our individualistic culture that are eroding human connections. To cure this epidemic, Americans must adjust their stance on an individualistic society and begin to prioritize one driven by our intrinsic worth and human connections. Since its creation, social media has sought to serve as a platform for individuals to express themselves, gain connections, and experiment with the idea of a virtual community. In essence, socializing without the need to ever meet in person. However, the individualistic nature of social media is simply incompatible with the creation of authentic relationships, only serving to exacerbate loneliness among its users. In fact, a Cigna study conducted in 2018 suggests that among individuals who sought to use social media as a tool to strengthen their existing social circles, it played a negligible role. However, among individuals who sought to gain new relationships through the use of social media, they were left more depressed, vulnerable, and self-conscious than before. Hindered by its inability to physically bring people together, social media attempts to replicate or mock human interactions by implementing user engagement tools, such as likes, comments, and reposts. But this is where the problem lies. Humans need face-to-face interactions to psychologically feel less lonely. In an increasingly digital society, the use and lure of social media are replacing opportunities for in-person interactions without removing the innate human need to meet face-to-face. hardly living up to the social part of its media.
To socially interact one-on-one with people, and I think nowadays people can really lose that skill because they're shy or they don't feel comfortable doing it, and so they don't do it. They just go home and interact with machines, basically.
By rebranding digital notifications and content as an alternate and easier way to socialize, this new inferior way of communication is artificially surrounding its users in a sea of people, masking the loneliness of many. Because social media is so heavily driven by these online interactions, our society easily abuses this to drive social media away from mutual empowerment to a place of performance. The nature of social media rewards those who show uniqueness, personal achievement, and social capital, hyper-individualistic features that our society values. When these competitive metrics are emphasized, it then encourages users to be reliant on the validation of others, leading them to go out of their way to appear impressive or unique.
When we are constantly bombarded by the happiness of others, including the fact that their social needs are seemingly met, we are forced to reflect upon our own insufficiencies. This is a phenomenon known as social comparison, and it can compound our feelings of loneliness.
This specifically targets people who are already suffering from loneliness, who turn towards social media as a way of escapism, where its wide outreach seemingly blesses the platform with limitless content, but curses its lonely users with ample evidence of their predicament. The sickly nature of social media is the absence of a moderator, a third party to give users a reality check, ultimately rendering it as an echo chamber for the most isolating thoughts to spread.
We were good, we were gold, kind of dream that can't be sold. We were right till we weren't, built a home and watched it burn. I didn't want to leave you, I didn't want to lie, started to cry but then remembered I can buy myself flowers, write my name in the sand, talk to myself for hours, see things you don't understand. I can take myself dancing, and I can hold my own head. Yeah,
You don't have to be lonely alone. Metropolitan Market is here to accompany you as you find comfort in your own solitude.
Today, many individuals chase after the American dream, a highly individualistic outlook that often limits the definition of success for many. It obsesses over having a stable job, notably one in corporate spaces, and home ownership for the nuclear household. And although this view only really started to shape Americans' outlook on life after World War II, its cultural implications continue to impact how individuals perceive their sense of fulfillment.
Through the relentless and often isolating journey to achieve this style of life, individuals often fail to recognize the connections and people around them, contributing to loneliness amidst a seemingly successful and fulfilling way of life.
In 1832, Frenchman Alexis de Tocqueville published his book Democracy in America, exposing the dark side of the American enterprise. Having observed an obsession with wealth among Americans, Tocqueville coined the word individualism to describe them. Worried that increasing material comfort would cause individuals to lose interest in their ancestral history and personal relationships, he predicted the loneliness crisis that would face Americans 200 years later, where each man would, quote, shut up in the solitude of his own heart, end quote. Driven by the individualistic desire to constantly advance in one's career, the meaning of the workplace has changed from a social and productive haven to a pragmatic powerhouse where coworkers are simply obligatory acquaintances. In fact, from the mid-1970s to 2012, the average amount of time Americans spent with their coworkers outside the workplace fell from around 2.5 hours to just under 1 hour per week. One major driving force for this inclination is the desire to climb up the corporate ladder and to avoid competing against their own friends for the same higher position, which can lead to awkwardness, feelings of betrayal, and resentment. To avoid threatening this harmony of the workplace, many preemptively balk at involving their coworkers in their personal saga, promoting a culture of loneliness.
I think that carries over into the school environment in interesting ways. When I think about the way in which certain teachers in this school, and myself included, value participation or push kids to be their best and to stand out, I think you get more of that dog-eat-dog kind of corporate environment where people are fighting for those scraps or fighting for the attention of their teachers for precious participation points, or to get in the favor of teachers for recommendations, things like that will help their future.
In such a stoic environment, many sociologists were not surprised to find that less than 1 in 5 Americans had a best friend at work, and the complete abandonment of friendly chatter witnessed during remote working has only exacerbated this sense of friendlessness.
The Japanese in the 50s and moving into the 80s really promoted this sort of management Z style of managing people in factories, which involved a lot of collaboration in small teams. And that appeared to be quite successful for the Japanese, especially in the car industry. So I think that there are models, even in a capitalist system like Japan, where you have some communal kind of sensibility that can promote the well-being of all the members in it. I know that sounds socialist, but I still think that sentiment or that organization can work within a capitalist system too.
Given the stressful nature of having to work and collaborate together for close to 8 hours a day, coworkers should be a unique and convenient source of friendship. No one needs to particularly like one another in the workplace, but having friendly chatter and seeing each other in a non-competitive and personal light certainly benefits the mental health of all employees.
Pragmatically speaking, the adoption of a shared vision and mutual care for all has scientifically shown to improve workplace productivity and boost morale, a win-win scenario for everyone.
Hi, it's me, your stapler. Ever since some day in 2020, the office lights have never been flicked on again. How are you at home? I haven't seen you in so long. I miss you. Don't you miss getting out of the house, getting to talk to some people? I mean, I've hung out with Steve. That's what we called your post-it notes ever since day 30 of isolation. But he keeps making sexual suggestive comments about my buttocks. If you look at a post-it note, I mean, I get how he'd get envious. At least no one can do that anymore on Zoom without getting called out. I bet you get to sleep in until 10 every morning. Lucky you. Hey, I hope I'm not too selfish, but can you come back to the office? Like, full-time, back in person? Just like how we always did. I miss our office activities. Wasted Wednesday, Thirsty Thursday, Fun Socks Friday. I remember Josh always had the fuzziest socks. But he also bikes to work without deodorant, so I guess that's just one more con. Hey, if you come back, I'll tell Josh to start wearing deodorant again.
The reward for a successful career is ultimately independence. Independence manifests through suburban home and car ownership, specifically control over which social interactions we wish to have, since the price of suburban households guarantee peace from the unwanted distractions of the city.
This default to privacy signifies our glamorization of self-isolation. since to be successful is to be able to block out the outside world, a nuisance. Therefore, suburban success translates in a very lonely manner, defined by its gated and abundant housing, but dearth of actual community.
So I live in the Issaquah Highlands, and there are basically about 5 different suburbia kind of communities there. I live in the one that's just right at the top of the hill, and have found absolutely fascinating the 65 kind of unit condominium place where I live. Nobody ever talks to each other because it's purely professional. So there might literally be less than 3 kids in the entire thing.
The foundation of the suburban nuclear family really took off between 1950 and 1965, where this family model constituted the majority of how Americans live. Before and after this 15-year period, however, this idealized style of housing only took up the minority, for good reason too, as the unsustainable and segregative nature of front yards and wide roads often restrict activity and the right of its residents to enjoy the company of their neighbors. Suburbs force residents of initial short proximity to relocate miles further away, simply to enjoy themselves and see each other.
If I could find a negative, or if there was a negative about suburban communities like mine, it would be that for somebody who is older, who doesn't work anymore, or is retired, they don't actually have anything they can do there. They typically will go to things like the casino, which Snoqualmie Casino sends a bus down to the communities, and it comes down at the same time every day and it parks, and all the old people line up and they get on the bus and they go gamble all day and do their socializing, and they come back and then they all get off the bus. I don't know that they're actually happy, but there's literally nothing for them to do in these suburban communities. And I do kind of find that tragic that they would basically be exploited just so they can hang out with other humans.
This individualistic style of living has also seeped into the way we live within our extended families. Most Americans are unfamiliar with the idea of multi-generational living, but its benefits are obvious and have been enjoyed by many collectivist cultures around the world.
Families don't have to spend money on babysitters. The home is full of activity, and there's a understanding of the centrality of the family that I think is far more inclusive than just mom and dad and 2 kids in a house in suburbia.
In many Western cultures, however, the moving out of 18-year-olds from the maternal household is a celebrated rite of passage to adulthood. This ubiquitous exodus from home is an isolating and fearful period of time for young people, but it is often celebrated in the mainstream. For many Americans, the inability to move out and possess their own territory is seen as a regressive step in life. Certainly, the cliché of children living in their parents' basement only emphasizes it in a shameful light. Oftentimes, Americans, especially those with college degrees, move in search of improved job prospects and opportunities, sacrificing their already established connections.
So I think that in some ways we're, in this country, robbed of community through this dream, this ideal of having this home, which is a status symbol, but at the same time might also disconnect us from the world around us.
As a result, the average American lives 18 miles from their mother, 3 in 4 Americans lock themselves in the solitude of their cars every morning, and 2 in 3 Americans don't know the people living within half-mile radius from their houses. In 2023, Dr. Vivek Murthy, American Surgeon General, sounded the national bell warning Americans of the growing loneliness crisis, coining the term loneliness epidemic to describe the growing solitude among his patients that underlies so many of their physical and mental illnesses. To address these issues, relationships need to be nurtured, and instead of putting them for later or substituting a phone call with text messages, we need to reorganize our innate need to physically hear our friend's voice or see their face. Murthy suggests making it a priority to contact a friend or family member for at least 15 minutes per day. For Americans craving friendships who inevitably turn towards social media, Murthy suggests looking around one's neighborhood. Organizing neighborhood events can be a powerful way to share honesty and vulnerability with each other, strengthening the bondage of the community and introducing new, unanticipated friendships.
So it's kind of created a lot of social interaction just from the one happy hour that I had. And it was so easy because you just say, show up with your own, drink. I didn't have to do anything. I just basically had people come and say hi to each other. And then everybody was just so happy to spend 2 or 3 hours just, distance, but like talking to each other because you're not interacting. Especially some of the people in that neighborhood were alone in their house during COVID. I at least had my family, but there were many people that were in my neighborhood that were in their house alone during COVID. So that was their one thing every weekend that they were looking forward to was our happy hour.
To tackle the underlying issue of individualism in society, however, many can find a collective purpose behind volunteering. When we are so torn by constant competition and hostility, volunteering presents a unique opportunity to remind ourselves of the value we bring to the world. This is especially important to mend the destruction of self-esteem that keeps many lonely people in a cycle of self-isolation. Volunteering is the antithesis of individualism. To willingly serve others and to find unity through the shared vision strengthens our social fabric.
1 in 4 Americans feel like no one understands them personally, a striking indictment of the individualistic culture that we've cultivated, where we value our wealth, reputation, and status of success over our humanity. In social media, our craving for a self-centered image is causing us to lose perception of other people. In the workplace, we're buying material wealth and paying with our social capital, which is practically buying bronze and paying with gold. And within our household and among our neighbors, our reluctance to see the intrinsic value in the presence of people is causing us to lose out on a whole host of interactions that transcend any material achievement.
If we recognize this silent epidemic that is causing so much of us to suffer under the facade of success, we must finally look around ourselves and start salvaging all of us neglected people who deserve love.
I don't feel a single thing. Have the pills done too much? Haven't caught up with my friends in weeks, and now we're out of touch. I've been driving in LA, and the world, it feels too big. Like a floating ball that's bound to break. Snap my psyche like a twig. And I just wanna see if you feel the same as me. Do you ever get a
It closed on me. How do you do this?
Anything. Just press the set button. Oh my god, no. The set button on the roundabout. Set! No!
Americans aren't good with roundabouts. There's only one on MI and it's gigantic.
What the fuck is
So it's like try to do it like more, have more vibrant like crying, like it's like like you're actually crying. This is so too late. You should have started filming earlier. Oh!
Do you need to go flush?
I think that's very insulting.
Oh, there he goes.
That's very insulting.